Hey everyone, so it's Hearth and welcome back to my channel. So on today's video, we are going to be talking about elemental correspondences and how you can use them within your own personal practice. So as some of you may already know, I spent a lot of the early parts of my magical practice being an elemental practitioner. I considered myself to be an elemental witch, and I worked with the elements in almost all areas of my magical practice. Now during this time, I spent a lot of time and energy focusing on the elemental correspondences, what herbs and crystals and items represented each individual element, and I created my own correspondence lists for my own personal practice. Now I worked with these lists for several years, and that's mainly what I want to be talking about today. The correspondences that I found for the different elements and how you can use them if you choose to within your own personal practice. Now I do want to say before we get started that correspondence lists vary from person to person. There is no one right series of correspondences for everything in the world. Instead, every individual practitioner is going to have their own individual correspondences, and these are my personal correspondences. Now within my own personal practice, I focused on the four main Western elements, those being earth, air, fire and water. Now I know within some traditions there are more elements. They may include spirit or metal, but within my own personal practice, these are the four elements that I worked with and that I'm going to be talking about today. Now of course, if you want to practice elemental magic for yourself, I would definitely suggest taking any information that I give you today and running with it, finding even more information, going for more correspondences, picking up some books on the subject, or following more elemental practitioners on YouTube or online to find their correspondences so you can develop your own practice from the pieces of information you get from everyone that you can talk to and that you can listen to. My correspondence list definitely isn't the be-all and end-all of magical correspondences. It's just what I personally work with. So enough with the talking in the intro, let's get on with the correspondences. Now I'm going to work through each element in turn. So if you did want to keep notes, I'll do my best to put a timestamp of when I start each element down in the description box. So the first element is earth. Now to start off with, let's talk about colours. So the colours of earth are rather stereotypical in some ways. They are pale green, dark green, brown and black. But it's also colours found in nature such as olive, fawn, taupe, and also colours like natural beeswax. That natural golden colour is often very closely connected with the earth element. Now the tool connected with the earth element within Wiccan tradition is the Pentacle. Now this also connects very closely to the tarot suit that it's connected with, which is the Pentacles. So you start to see everything kind of tying together. So now we're moving on to earth stones, or crystals and stones that are associated with the earth element. Now a lot of people do consider all crystals and stones that have been created on earth or by earth's processes to be earth association crystal and stones, which makes a lot of sense considering that most, if not almost all, of the stones and crystals that we can find have been created through earthly processes and within the earth's crust. And so because of that, a lot of people consider all crystals and all stones to be connected with the earth element, but not everyone. So this section is mainly for those who want specific crystals and stones that they can work with in relation to the earth element. Now a lot of these stones are actually connected with the earth element due to their colour. So things like malachite, emerald, peridot and jade are very closely connected with the earth element because their basic colour is green. And because green is so closely connected with the element of earth, almost all crystals that are green are also connected with the element of earth. You then have stones such as quartz. So quartz is found in many different forms. It's one of the most prolific crystals and stones to exist on earth. and because of that, it is very deeply connected with the earth element. You also have more unusual things such as granite and jasper. These are also connected, and you often also find people using rock salt as a crystal or stone that is connected with the earth's energy. Now, although these technically aren't stone, they are crystalline structures, and because of that, they often get considered to be crystals. So you also have things like onyx and tourmaline. These are also really connected with the earth element. So there's lots and lots of things to work on. If you don't have access to the more expensive crystals like emerald or peridot, you can just use jade or quartz to represent the earth's energy if you wanted to. Now, moving on to herbs. Once again, we have a similar issue as we had with the crystals stones portion, because all herbs that grow in the earth or on the earth are connected to the earth element. And so some people would say that all herbs, all plants are connected with the earth element, which yes, they are, but there are specific herbs that are considered to be more closely connected with earthly energy and correspondence. So for connection with the earth's energy, a lot of people will work with wood. Wood is very deeply connected to the earth's energy because they have one of the largest reaches within the earth. Their roots go so far down and so widespread that they are physically very deeply rooted into the earth. And so you'll find a lot of people working with oak and birch and ash and willow in correspondence with the earth because they do have such a deep-rooted connection with the earth. And because of that, you often find people working with nuts when it comes to earth energy. So you'll find them working with acorns or with conkers or whatever other nuts and seeds that you might find that come from different varieties of trees wherever you live. These are very closely connected with the earth energy because they come from a plant that is directly and very deeply rooted into the earth itself. Now, beyond this, you'll often find fruit that comes from trees is very popular as well. So things like apples, pears, these are all really closely connected with the earth's energy. Now, beyond trees, you do have a lot of standard herbs as well. Things like patchouli are really popular when it comes to connecting with the earth's energy. That's for many different reasons, but if anyone has actually smelt the raw herb patchouli, it smells just like dirt. Not even joking, patchouli when it's dried smells literally like earth. It smells like fresh earth, and because of that, it's very closely connected with the earth element. Now, you also have things like sage, ivy, primrose. These are all really closely connected. And then lastly, you do have a few unusual things. So things like oats. Oats and seeds are really closely connected with the earth's energy. It's about that connection to the earth and its connection to its cycles. So the fact that grains are almost a product of the earth's energy, they are very closely connected as earth correspondence. And then you also have things like moss and lichen, things that naturally develop on wood and on trees, on bushes, on just objects. It's the earth reclaiming back its space. And so moss and lichen are very closely connected with the earth element, and you will find quite a few practitioners using these within their own workings to deeply connect themselves to the earth's energy. So that's quite a lot of herbs in that list, but you really can use any number of herbs that you want because at its core, all herbs are closely connected to the earth's energy. So next up are representing items. Now, especially if you follow the Wiccan tradition, you might find that you are required to use specific elemental correspondences within your altars or when you're doing ceremonial circle castings. And a lot of people might not know what to use in this instance. So if you're asked to use a correspondence for a particular element, the most common ones to use are a small cup of dirt, or you can also use rock salt if you wanted to. You can also use green candles. They're also really commonly connected with the earth element if you're wanting to work in a ceremonial fashion. Now, the zodiac signs that are connected with the earth element are Taurus, Capricorn, and Virgo. So the compass direction of the earth element is north. So if you're going to be setting up an elemental altar or if you're doing an elemental circle casting, you're going to want to work with the northerly compass direction if you want to leave offerings for the earth element. Now, there are lots and lots of spirits connected with the earth element, and these are the ones that are most prevalent. They are things like gnomes and brownies, elves, dwarves, hobgoblins, and leprechauns. These are really, really prevalent within the earth elemental associations. The season that Earth is associated with is winter. The time of day is midnight. The planetary bodies are the Earth and the Moon. The moon phase it's connected with is the new moon. The metals it's associated with are lead and silver. And the incense is very closely connected to the earth are storax and benzoin. So as you can see, there are a lot of correspondences just for the earth element. So I explained a lot about the reasons why you might want to use these correspondences with the earth element. So I'm not going to explain those things again in the other elements, just so we can kind of speed this video along so it's not like an hour and a half of a video. So the next element is air. Now the colours of the air element are yellow, pale blue, pale purple, pale pink, violet, lavender, cream and white. So very pastel, pale colours are associated with the air element. The tool that is closest connected to the air element for me is the wand. Now for some people it's the athame. This does vary person to person. For me it's the wand, for others it might be the athame. It's up to you really how you feel as to which tool works best. And the tarot suit connected to the air element is the wands suit. Moving on to crystals and stones. Now this category is quite varied from person to person. These are just my personal correspondences. And they consist of topaz, sapphire, chalcedony, amethyst, citrine, mica and fluorite. Now of course different people will have different correspondences. These are just my personal favourites that I choose to work with when connecting with the air element. Now moving on to herbs. Now with the air element, a lot of the time the herbs that are connected with it are flowers. So a lot of flowers, regardless of whether you directly know the elemental correspondence, most flowers of plants do associate with the air element. And because of that, you can use flowers from whatever plant they may come from to represent the air element if you want to. These are just the very specific plants that I personally connect with the air element. And they are plants like vervain, yarrow, primrose, violet, frankincense, pansy, myrrh, clover, dill, lavender, benzoin, copal, and lemongrass. Now within that you'll see there's a lot of resins, and that's because the air element is very closely connected with incense, the smoke aspect. And a lot of these resins like frankincense, myrrh, benzoin, copal, pine resin, they are all very closely connected with the air element. So if in doubt, flowers and resins are really closely connected with the air element because of their connection with air pollination and also their connection with incense smoke. So those are really two good bets. If you don't quite know what to work with, flowers and incense resins are really, really good. So next we're moving on to items. Now this is for representing it beyond the other items that I've already spoken about. So when you're choosing to represent the air element, you can use a yellow candle, you can also use feathers, or you can use incense. So there's a few different options there, plus everything else I've already spoken about. So you can choose to use a wand as your association to the air element. You can choose to use a herb or a crystal. There's so many different options, but those three are the most common to use in a ritualistic, ceremonial sense. So next we have the zodiac signs. Those connected with the air element are Aquarius, Libra, and Gemini. So the compass direction is east. The season is spring. The time of day is dawn. Spirits and elementals connected with the air element are sylphs, angels, pixies, and flying fair folk. These are all really closely connected to the air element. The planets that it's associated with are Jupiter and Venus. The moon phase is the waning moon. The metals are copper, tin, and mercury, and the incense are lots of resins. So things like benzoin, frankincense, myrrh, but also woods like sandalwood are really commonly associated with the air element. Now the next element is fire. My personal favourite, I have to say. So the colours of the fire element are very hot and fiery. They are red, orange, yellow, gold, burgundy, crimson, any really rich, deep, fiery colour is fantastic for connecting with the fire element. Now, the tool of the fire element really depends on the person. I personally connect the athame and the sword to the fire element. Some people will connect the wand. It's all personal preference, but for me personally, it's always been the athame. And alongside this, the tarot suit for the fire element is the sword suit. So the stones and crystals connected with the fire element are largely those that are red or fiery in colour, or those that have been created under fiery conditions. So stones like obsidian are really popular for connecting with the fire element because it is essentially volcanic glass. It was created under very fiery, hot conditions. And although for a lot of stones and crystals this is also the case, when it comes to connecting with the fire element, there are some that stand out more than others. So obsidian is a big one. So is lava rock. Literally just pumice that has come out of volcanic eruptions is used in connection with the fire element. You also have the fiery crystals like the carnelian, the red jasper, the fire agate. These are all really popular to work with the fire element. You then have more precious stones like garnet and ruby. And then there may be more interesting ones like the bloodstone, because it may not at first appear to be a fiery red stone, but there are definitely flecks of that red in a really good bloodstone crystal. You also have things like amber, which despite being created by trees, can be connected with the earth element, or because of its fiery orange colour, is often connected with the fire element as well. And then you have things like tiger eye. These are crystals that are very closely connected with power and passion and force and energy. And because of that, they're often associated with the fire element. Moving on to herbs. Now, a lot of the herbs connected with the fire element are fiery. They are hot, they're fiery, they're also often not particularly nice to touch. So a very popular one are nettles. Now, I have to say I've worked with fresh nettles and dry nettles, and even dried nettles that have been chopped up into little tiny pieces. They still get you. Nettles are a really popular one, especially in the UK. They are very closely connected with the fire element, and so it's really useful here because we have a lot of nettles over here. But you can also use herbs like chili peppers, cayenne pepper, whatever it might be, whatever's hot and fiery that you can find. But also bell peppers, just red bell peppers, red and yellow, are also really commonly used. Now you also have things like mustard. You can use mustard seeds. They are really, really good for this. You also have marigold, which is very closely connected with solar energy, that fiery, sunny energy. And so that's also connected in as well. But you then have things like onion and garlic, things you might not at first expect, as well as cinnamon and basil and allspice, hibiscus, juniper, but also you have citrus fruits like oranges, lemons and limes. Grapefruits as well are really good for connecting with the fire element. These very sharp, bitter fruits that require a lot of sunlight and heat to create are also really closely connected with the fire element. So there's lots of things there in that list. Now, some of them might be a bit harder to find, but there are some in there like garlic and onion, cinnamon, basil, that a lot of people are able to access within their daily lives. Now, the item that's often used to represent the fire element in ceremony and ritual is a candle. It doesn't have to be any particular colour, it could just be a tea light, but a lot of people, if they're already using other candles, will use a red candle to connect with the fire element, along with anything else that I've already mentioned in this list. So any herbs, any crystals, they can also be used as well. So the zodiac signs connected with the fire element are Aries, Leo and Sagittarius. The compass direction is south, the time of the day is noon, the season is summer. Spirits and elementals connected with the fire element are jinn and salamanders. There are also many fae spirits that connect very closely with fire, so these can also be included in as well. The planets are Mars, the Sun and Jupiter. The moon phase is the waxing moon. The metals are gold, iron and brass, and the incense is copal, which is an interesting one because it kind of crosses over between the air element and the fire element. But any kind of fiery herbs are fantastic in fire-based incenses. Now lastly, let's move on to water. Another one that is very, very popular for people. They often very deeply connect with water. It's almost a basal instinct that we are automatically drawn to water. So the colours connected with the water element are light blue, dark blue, turquoise, teal, seafoam green, white, grey, turquoise and silver. So there's lots of variety, but they're all kind of the same watery tones. Now the tool connected with the water element is the chalice or the cauldron. Both are used as vessels for water, so you'll often see these being used interchangeably depending on the practitioner. And the tarot suit connected with the water element is the cups suit. Crystals and stones. Now a lot of these crystals, stones and other items, you'll see what I mean when I get into it, are connected with the water element often because of their colour, because of their name or because of their origin. And you'll see this quite a lot as I go through the list. So the first ones are aquamarine, as you can tell, very closely connected to the sea. Pearl, also very closely connected with aquatic life. Moonstone, which is very closely connected to the sea and the tides. So you can see a pattern forming here. You also have river stones, which essentially are any stones that have been eroded due to water flow. So it doesn't just have to be river, it could also be things that you find on a beach. Any stone that has been eroded by water processes can be used to associate with the water element. You also have crystals like fluorite, beryl, amethyst. Coral is another one that's very, very popular. A lot of coral actually gets washed up after storms, and a lot of people will use this within their own magical practice to associate with that water energy. And the last few are blue topaz, lapis lazuli, and sodalite. So the herbs and plants that are connected with the water element are mostly leafy plants. You'll often find it quite a lot. That those connected with the water element are often very leafy. So things like lemon balm, it's very closely connected with the water element. Any plant that resides in the water, like water lilies, like seaweed, even though that's an algae and not a plant, are very closely connected with the water element. Plants like fern, motherwort, and roses are very closely connected with the water element, as well as night blooming flowers. So like night blooming jasmine is very closely connected with the water element because of their association with lunar energy and their desire for lunar energy in particular. You then have plants like catnip, melon, cucumber, chamomile, gardenia, orris, thyme, lotus, and willow. Willow is a plant that is exceptionally closely connected with water because of where it chooses to reside. You'll often find that most willow trees will actually only grow fully when they're next to a source of water. So that might be an underground spring, that might be a surface spring or a river. You'll often find that willows are drawn and will only grow well next to water sources. So they are very closely connected with the water element, despite most trees being connected with the earth element. So I hope you can see in all this that there are kind of subtle underlying factors for why each plant, each herb, each flower, each crystal is connected to the element it's connected with. It's usually because of one or two underlying factors that really links it all together. Now the items connected with the water element for the purposes of ritual, ceremony and altars are often blue candles, especially if you're using the other candles to represent the other elements. But also a small dish of sea salt is really good, or a small chalice of water. These are all fantastic for working with the water element, as well as anything else that I've already mentioned. Now the zodiac signs associated with the water element are Pisces, Cancer and Scorpio. Compass direction is west, the time of the day is dusk, and the season is autumn. These spirits and elementals connected with the water element are undines or undines. I do very much apologise, I am terrible at pronunciation. Merfolk, siren and nymphs. These are all very closely connected with the water element. The planets are Saturn and Mercury. The moon phase is the full moon. The metals are silver and quicksilver, which is another name for Mercury. And the incense is myrrh, which is very closely connected to the water element. But as you've seen with the others, is that the incenses are very much interchangeable between the elements. So those are all the correspondences for the 4 elements that I personally have and do work with. Now there are many other correspondences that go into far more detail than these, but these are just the ones that I would work with in my day-to-day practice, the things that I stuck to for years and years and years. And I really enjoyed working with these, and I found them to be exceptionally useful. And when I had these in my Book of Shadows, I would find that I would go back to it time and time again to double check the directional position, to double check the time of the day, and I found these super duper useful. Now the next section, I want to talk just a little bit about how to use these correspondences, because a lot of people will have list after list after list of correspondences and have no idea how to actually utilize them within their own magical practice. Because it's all well and good having books that contain hundreds of correspondences, but how do you actually use them? So the first way that I personally use them is in altar representation. So if I was going to be doing a specific altar for the elements, so all elements, or if I was going to be working on an altar for just one particular element, so the water element or the fire element, I would pick out specific correspondences to connect with that element within my own altar space. If I was going to be doing a fire element altar, I would most likely have a red cloth of some kind. That could just be a very small cheap piece of cloth, it could be a piece of velvet or a piece of silk, whatever you want to use. And then I would add on there candles in the colours that associate with the fire element. So I'd be using reds and oranges, some golds if I had access to them. I'd then be scattering around some crystals that connect with the fire element. So some red jasper, some obsidian, some lava rock. I'd be dotting that around. And then I would have a small dish that contained herbs of the fire element, or I'd be burning some incense that connected with the fire element. And if I was going to work on that altar to do meditations with it, to connect with it, I might want to choose to do that at noon, at the point in time that's most closely connected to the fire element. I might want to set that altar up in the summer and work on it summer to really connect with that fiery energy. There's so much you can do with it when it comes to altars. When it comes to circle casting or ceremony, especially ceremonial circle casting, when you're going to be calling in the quarters, calling in the different elements, I would do what I can to set up the circle in a way that represents each element equally. So I would start by having a compass. Now you can get an app on your phone, you don't need an actual compass. When I was doing this I had an actual compass because I didn't have a phone, but you can use a compass, you can use an app, whichever you find easiest. And you need to find north from your point in the world, and then in front of you you're going to want to lay out a small section that's going to be the edge of your circle that connects to that element. So you could then add a small green candle and a little dish of dirt. That's what I would often use. You would then find east, and you would set up a little section for air, and you would have, say, an incense burning and a yellow candle, or you'd have a feather there to represent the air element. You'd then find south, and then you can add a red candle and herbs connected to the fire element, or a little tea light. And you go round the circle and you add things in. So then for water, you might want to use a little dish of seawater or salt water with a blue candle, connecting all of these elements in. And by adding the extra associations, you add extra energy into what you're doing. And then when you're calling them in, they almost act as little offerings to the elements that you are calling in to your circle. Now, if you're working with an element during spell work and ritual, you might want to add these specific correspondences into your working. If you wanted to call on the energy of water to kind of wash away the pain of a negative relationship, you could run a ritual bath, and in there you add salt water to not only connect with the element of water, but also to connect with the idea of cleansing, to kind of cleanse away that negativity. You could then add in rose petals to not only connect with the water element, but also with romance and what you kind of want to clear away. You want to bring in that self-love, but also wash away the kind of negative associations you have with love. You could then add in lemon balm, which is similar. It's all about emotion and feeling. And you can add all these items in and surround yourself with crystals and scents that connect with the water element. And then you can call on the energy of the water element to assist you with that working. And in that you have all the associations of the water element, but you also have things that connect with your intention. And you also have a different way of undertaking that working. If I was going to do the opposite way, and I was, say, going to do a fire working, I often do things in a very fiery manner. So I often have a space that's very red. I have a fire pit that is fantastic, but also you can just use a cauldron. I then often work in red ink to kind of add that power and energy into it. I then physically work with the element of fire carefully. I want to add very, very carefully. But you can set fire to petitions, calling on the fire element to help manifest something into your life or cleanse something out of your life. You could be burning very fiery herbs. You could be leaving offerings that are like cayenne pepper and nettles and just fiery, fiery things when you work with it. You could be doing a candle spell where you call on the energy of the fire element. And that candle spell has little offerings around it of crystals and herbs that are connected with the fire element. But you've also loaded, dressed, spelled that candle for your intention. So you're adding the two together. So you're connecting with the fire energy, but you're also putting your intention into the working. You are petitioning for assistance by leaving offerings and items of representation, but you aren't allowing it to overtake the working completely. So those are just a few ways that you can work with it within spell work and ritual. But the elements don't have to just be worked with in these ways. They can be worked on during day-to-day life. So you often find that specific elements are connected with specific aspects of life. So fire is often very closely connected with power, passion. It's an element of doing, of action. Whereas you often find that water is connected with emotion and cleansing. Earth is very connected to grounding. It's very nurturing and loving. Air is all about expression and creativity. It's about freeness and freeing your soul and your mind. And because of this, if something in your life is a little out of balance, you can call on the energy of an element during day-to-day life to ask them to assist you in bringing and boosting something within your own life. So if you struggle to appreciate yourself, you struggle to connect to the time and place that you're in, you find yourself disassociating quite a lot and you don't really have the focus that you need, you could always carry around a little charm that contained herbs and small crystals that are connected with the earth element. And you could ask that the earth element assists you in your life, and you can carry that around with you, a small little pouch or a locket or a charm that you carry around with you. And you can call on them for assistance. You can connect with them, work with them to help them help you balance out things in your life, because no one's life is perfectly balanced. When one thing is up, another thing is down. Like if you have a perfectly balanced life, you're rare, because most people simply don't. And so you can work with the elements in this way to help balance things out in your life. But you can also do meditations to help with this, and because of that you can always create a meditative state. Colours in particular are very, very good to work with. Colours and scents when it comes to meditations. So if you want to do an earth meditation, you might want to light the room in a green glow. You might want to dress in green or have a green altar cloth, a green space to work with, to connect with that energy. And online there's also lots of elemental meditations. If you want to connect more closely with an element, try and find an elemental meditation that you can work with that really helps you connect with these different elements and its different associations so that you can work with that in your own personal life. Now, the last way that's fantastic for working with the elements is working with elemental spirits. Now, there are particular spirits that are very well known for being connected to the different elements. Now, some of these are elementals, like undines and undines and salamanders, but there are some that are simply connected due to their kind of nature. So, boggarts and brownies are very closely connected to the earth element, simply because they mostly reside within the land. But then you also have things like pixies, which are very closely connected with the air element. Despite them not being elementals themselves, they are very closely connected with this element. And we can work with things in association with the elements in order to connect with the spirits that relate to it. So for example, brownies in particular, they really like items that come from the earth. So they like oats, they like seeds, they like nuts. A lot of them like honey. And because of this, you can connect it both with the earth element and also with their associations. So if you want to work with elemental magic, you don't have to just restrict yourself down to, I can only work with elements. You don't have to. There's lots of things that are connected to elements. So you can work with the crystals and crystal magic. You can also work with herbs and herbalism. You can work with incenses. You can also work with spirits and elementals. There's so many different options when it comes to elemental magic. So don't feel as though you're restricted to just working with the elements, because there's so many things connected to it as well. And another thing I do want to say that's very important that I get asked about a lot, you aren't limited to working with an element just because that's where your zodiac sign falls. Now, I know there's a lot more to astrology than just your sun sign or your moon sign or your rising sign, but a lot of people, especially when they're starting out, they feel as though they can't work with the fire element because they are a water element zodiac sign, like a Pisces or a Cancer. Or they feel as though they can't work with the water element because they're a Virgo. When in reality, we are all made up of all of the elements. If we are missing an element within our lives, we no longer exist. Everything on earth is made up of all elements. And because of that, they're all significant and they're all important. So don't feel as though you have to just restrict yourself to your zodiac element. You definitely don't need to. For instance, I'm a water zodiac sign, but I most closely connect with the fire element. It's been one of those things. It hasn't always been that way, but I very closely connect with the fire element. We are all elements, and so we can all work with them equally. That being said, some people do find they are more connected to one element than the others to start off with. That being said, some people do feel more closely connected to one element than the others at the start of their practice, and that's completely normal. Don't get disheartened if you feel more connected to the earth element and not connected at all to the air element, because that's simply how it works. When you're starting to work with the elements, you are going to have some elements that you connect with really easily and some that are much, much harder to connect with. For me, I was always way more connected to the fire and the water element than I was to earth and air. And it took me time to develop that connection. And as with everything else, elemental practice takes time. You're not going to instantly be able to work with all of the elements perfectly. It's going to take a while to form that connection with them, to be able to work with them effortlessly within your magical practice. So if it's the case that you feel connected to one but not the others, don't ignore the others, but definitely take the time to work with them and connect with them alongside the element that you already really easily connect with. And that's the best way to kind of form an even, balanced connection. The more time you spend connecting with an element, studying it, working with it, spending time around it. If you struggle to connect with the earth element, spend some time in nature, in meadows, in fields, in woodland, safely, of course. If you struggle to connect with the water element, go to areas where there's lots of natural water. Go walk by a river or go to the beach, or even just spend time in a bathtub. Honestly, it's that connection, it's forming that bond with it. If you don't often work with fire, fire might be the hardest one to connect with. And so it's good to spend some time undertaking some fire meditations, some candle flame meditations to really help connect yourself with it. Or do some smoke meditations or smoke divination if you're struggling to connect with the air element. These are all great ways of finding a closer connection to that particular element. And eventually you'll find that you can connect with all elements really easily, and they are such a fulfilling association to work with in your magical practice. They have such powerful, strong energies that they are wonderful to draw on during meditation, ritual, spell work, whatever it might be. They're wonderful to connect with. So if you've never considered working with them before, I would say definitely look into working with them because they are fantastic to connect with. So anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope you found it useful. It's definitely a longer one, but I wanted to try to fit in as much information as I possibly could. If you did enjoy it, feel free to give it a like. It really, really means so much to me. If you have any comments, questions, concerns, video ideas, or just want to chit chat with the community down in the comment section, feel free to post a comment. And if you did enjoy the magical content on this channel or in this video, feel free to hit subscribe. I post new magical content every Wednesday and every Saturday at 6 p.m. So I did want to ask, How many of you guys already work with the elements within your magical practice? Do you specialize with elemental magic, or is it something you just dabble in? I would absolutely love to know. So I hope you guys have a marvelous magical day, and I will see you in the next video.